I've actually been listening to your channel before I even started my channel.
Oh, really?
I've been listening to your channel for years.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I'm glad you're enjoying.
Yeah, it's interesting. You always you have the most interesting guests.
Really? I think
Yeah,
everybody does. I guess I feel that same way about other podcasters. I'm always like, I love what they're saying. But then again, I'm in a different state of mind. I think it's a state of mind. So,
yeah, and you don't always agree with the people that you're interviewing.
no, if I had my way, I'd have more people that like hate Gnosticism because I want this dialogue. I want it all on the table. And I know there's no movement or religion that doesn't have blind spots or hasn't been weaponized or has a shadow side. So I want it all out in the open.
I'll just let people know you are Miguel Conner. You host Aeon Bike Gnostic Radio, and you've been hosting it for how long have you been hosting it?
Oh my God, a long time. It's a hard answer because I started it around 2006, but I was part of this network called Free Thought Radio, which was an new atheist radio, and they would just put the shows, and then that folded years later, and I was just putting out podcasts on my website. That's before iTunes and the golden age of podcasting, and it was just a part-time simply sharing what my passion was, which was Gnosticism, ancient and modern. And then it was, I think, late 2018 that I was going through a crisis. And as they say, whenever you're going through a hard time, there's two things you can do: help others or create even more, go nuts with your artistic self. So I said, I'm just going to start putting out this podcast as a full time, and it just exploded once I did that in 2018, and it's been growing, and I've been very fortunate and even surprised that people are interested in this topic. Although I shouldn't be that surprised because Gnosticism is about simulation, shadowy figures, extraterrestrial beings that might have created, it fits in well with not just science fiction and technology, but it does fit in well with the sort of psyche of our modern culture today.
Oh yeah, it covers quite a lot. Do you want to explain Gnosticism for people? Because my audience might not be completely familiar with it just yet. And there's so many definitions out there as to what it means. Do you have one that maybe most people agree on?
Well, no, I don't think they agree on with scholars. There's still a big debate about Gnosticism because we have to be honest, the Nag Hammadi library was discovered in 1945, same year that the nuclear bomb exploded. I don't think it's a coincidence. There were
Mm.
Gnostic Gospels in the 19th century, and the Catholic Church and the Greek Orthodox Church have been talking about it, but the first English translation of the Nag Hammadi library just came out like 1979. And when you think we've had centuries to interpret the Quran, the Jewish Bible, all of the Vedas, we've only maybe had 40 years to truly get our hands wet. So there's a lot of kind of back and forth. But to give you what I feel is a good sort of elevator pitch, I guess if you and I were in an elevator and we had 40 stories to go and it was a slow ride, I would say Gnosticism is an ancient way of inner knowing. You could almost say it's a inheritor of the Egyptian mysteries, and it posits that we are in a sort of simulation. There is a part of us which the Gnostics would call the divine spark. I guess you could call it consciousness, the soul, that has fallen into this, you might say, fake world. Again, as my friend Gordon says, Eastern traditions talk about a false reality. To the Gnostics, you would call it a faked reality. This reality has been coded to trap us, or part of us that is immortal and eternal and timeless, into this world. And most of us human beings, some Gnostic groups said animals and plants are included, the light is in everything, has been trapped and has forgotten its supernal source, that source beyond the stars, with this supreme consciousness, or as the Gnostics called it, literally the alien God. And we've forgotten who we are. and this alien god or consciousness sends these communications via these entities that might be real or not, called the Gnostic Revealers, who throughout history will come in the shape of Jesus. Some said Buddha, Mary Magdalene, Zoroaster, it depends. And these Gnostic Revealers don't come down to save us from sin or anything like that, but they come down to wake us up to our original home beyond the stars. And they come to wake us up, to give us the red pill. If you would, if your listeners have watched The Matrix or Westworld or the Truman Show, many shows like that, you'll see that these are, or even as I like to say, the Lego movie is actually a very Gnostic film if you think about it.
It's a great movie.
But these wake us up to who we are. And as in the Matrix, once you take the red pill, it's not like you're enlightened or, you're Paul of Tarsus seeing the light of Jesus. You look around and you realize that the world is a construct. It is a fallen world, and we are trapped within these false program forms. And we must perform these ecstatic rituals for altered states of consciousness that would allow us to rise to these astral flights and make contact with this alien god. Again, they were inheritors of the Egyptian mystery. So the idea of, taking these trips like the Egyptians with Ra through the stars and trying to avoid these monsters or other dark gods was what the Gnostics thought, except the Gnostics said you could do that while you were alive. And as you wake up more, you become more divine. And once you become fully divine through these rituals imparted by the Gnostic Revealer, you will eventually, the end game is to not just, get out of this world, but help others wake up. As many have said, the Gnostics were a shamanistic religion. It's all about altered states of consciousness. It's all about rising into the spirit realm, and it's all about healing others, both physically and mentally. And there are other features I don't know if you would like to cover. For example, there's a belief in reincarnation. There is a strong thrust towards a divine feminine, which we lost in Christianity and Judaism, but the Gnostics sort of kept it there. And there's other features of, Sophia would be one of the main, I guess, divine beings or goddesses in the Gnostic ethos or canon. So those I would say that's pretty much a good, more or less good summary of what Gnosticism is. But again, I would urge your audience, go watch The Matrix, go watch Westworld, go watch the Lego movie.
Yeah, and the fact that it was translated in 1979, that's really interesting because that kind of coincides with the New Age movement, which is very accepting of everything, including Gnosticism. And so do you think people get confused between New Age and Gnosticism?
You could say so. I mean, in Gnosticism, there is their spiritual tech is called gnosis, which is it's Greek for knowledge, but it means in their context a direct experience with the higher worlds, or a direct experience with God. And that's the ironic thing, is that gnosis, as much as the Gnostics talk about, is the one thing that's not exclusive to the Gnostics. The Neoplatonists, shamans, Christian mystics, New Agers, all kind of believe in this sort of rising up to make contact with God. What changed is the Gnostics had this belief that we are in a simulation, that we are completely alien to this world, and so are the spirits and the animals and the trees and all that. And what really separates the Gnostics from so many other perennial movements, if you would, is the idea of the archons. To the Gnostics, this simulation was ruled by a being who they often refer to as the demiurge, who they associated with the God of the Jewish Bible, the vengeful, petty, and selfish kind of deity that ruled over Palestine. And this demiurge was, under this demiurge were these other beings called the archons, were these, you might say, angelic fallen angels who managed the simulation and did whatever they could to keep us asleep. So the Gnostics really had an impetus over the idea of darkness or evil. Although to the Gnostics, as the Gospel of Philip says, the mother of all sins is ignorance. Us being ignorant of our true nature, of the suffering of others, of the simulation, that's the sin. And the things we do to stay ignorant, like spending too much time on social media, doing drugs, or being selfish, that's the real sin, because the more ignorant we are, the farther we are away from our divine inheritance, or to wake up to the true nature. And that always has been the conflict, because New Agers and other religions, they're more like, oh, the universe, there's a divine plan and it's all harmony and everything's going to work out in the circle of life. The Gnostics had this sort of sense of urgency, like, no, wake up. We got to do something. This place is not where we need to be, or this is not the true reality. And it's being managed and engineered by these beings called the demiurge and the archons.
So that's interesting. That's Jungian, like archetypes. Like
Jung was very, very influenced by Gnosticism. The foundation of his ideas are definitely based on the Gnostics. Jung would not say that the universe is bad, to an extent, but he certainly believed that who we are is a construct. Our ego thinks that it's running the show, but we have as Jung would say, a soul, a shadow, an anima, and an anima. So who we are is sort of the simulation. And Jung tried to say we need to bring it all together with individuation. And yes, the archetypes, that would be a Platonic, or the archetype is might say the building blocks of consciousness, the formless building blocks of consciousness in the universe itself. To Jung, it would be like the mother, the father, the king, the trickster, and it composes who we are, and it really drives what we are. Animals would have it too. They have a mother archetype. He associated with the instincts too. But to Jung, the universe was good. Although when he had an operation in his 60s, I forget what it was, maybe it was an ear or tooth, and he had a near-death experience, and he had a flight where he saw the higher worlds. And when he came down, he was like, man, I can't wait to get back. This place sucks compared to what I just saw. So
yeah, Swedenborg, and those kind of things. Now people are taking a lot of DMT. What do you feel about that? People say it's a technology.
I just took some, 2 weeks ago, I went back to my home in Portugal, Europe, and my uncle's the head of a group called Santo Daime, which is a Christian, you say it's Christian Brazilian, but they use ayahuasca as their sacrament. We have this ritual, and we take ayahuasca, and then we go into these altered states of mind. So I've had some incredible experiences where I've had out of body and astral flights, and one of them, the one that I did a few weeks ago, I was actually flying across the universe, and reality was breaking open, and the entire universe was a machine. I kept flying, and the world would open, and I would see like a glowing console. And then I was flying up to the mountains, because in Portugal we have where my uncle's church is, by the mountains, and the mountains would open, and it was a machine. And I'm like, aha, I knew it. This world is one machine. But then as I was flying over the world, the earth opened, and it was all a machine. And then I would see the stars opening up, and it was all a machine. And I was going for, I feel, light years. And I was like, oh my God, this entire universe, 14 billion years old, trillions of light years, is just one machine. And it was created to hold one being down. I didn't know what the being was, but the being perhaps is you or I, or it was Jesus or Sophia or the world soul. And it really freaked me out. And I kept looking. I was doing this ritual on ayahuasca, having this vision, and as I was coming down to my body, I was like, if I look at my hands, I'm going to find out two things. One, I'm a human being, and I am that person at the bottom of the machine. Two, my hands will be robotic, and I am an NPC. I am, doomed. I'm nothing. And I was too afraid to look at my hands for the rest of the ritual but the point is, For ayahuasca or DMT, I always suggest people have a good psychopath or hierophant, more like it, or a teacher or a shaman who can guide you, because how the ritual is will help you in your altered state of consciousness, your altered flights. And it may not be for you. Some people think ayahuasca is good. Some people, it might be ritual magic, meditation. I mean, what works for you? The Gnostics had varied rituals because they were so individualistic and really anarchist, that they had all these lodges across the Roman Empire because they believe what works for you. And if you don't like what we're doing, our ritual, then go over here and try something else. Some Gnostic groups did use psychedelics and entheogens, others did not. Others simply did meditation or vowel magic, others did contemplation. So it really depends on who you are. I can't say do it or not. But always have a good teacher or a guide when you're doing it. Don't go at it alone.
Yeah, especially for ayahuasca. I don't know who did it initially, but they have been able to take out the DMT from the ayahuasca, and people now just you just go for 5-10 minutes, and it's just pure everything.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can smoke it, but you can't ingest it because your body will just reject it. Well, nothing will happen. But if you have with the ayahuasca, you have with an MAO inhibitor. So that's why you have the two. But now with the DMT pens or just from a bong, and it's 10 minutes.
Wow. 10-minute
It's
high.
crazy. It is crazy.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing. I didn't even know. Again, I just do it the traditional way where you make this really foul tasting tea and you're doing all these chants and dances, and suddenly you go for 4 or 5 hours until the shaman says, all right, we're done. And as soon as he starts doing this like songs and chants that were done, you come down like that. But I had no idea about the DMT 10-minute high. Very interesting. I wonder, is it even legal? Because obviously ayahuasca is legal here in the United States or Portugal if it's done in a religious context.
Well, I don't see how it could not be done in a religious context, because I've shown people who were hard atheists before I showed them this. And of course, I come to everything from an American perspective, a young American perspective. So I'm looking at it like, oh, this is a technology which will allow us to see outside the matrix. And it really has very little to do with what you want to happen. You're just going to go. Like imagine that trip, all of that just taken out into 10 minutes. It just takes you. And then
Wow.
you go and you see, I've seen crazy things. I don't want to scare people with what I've seen, but in the nicest ones, you kind of just swim in color and patterns. And that's where you are. And then you just come back to your body, and then you're good to drive in half an hour. But
Wow.
leave it to Americans to just, take something spiritual and just be like,
Fast
okay, we get
food
10 minutes.
drugs, right? 10-minute fast food drugs. And you're right. I mean, as we're taught doing Santo Daime and others, is the plan chooses what you're going to go through. It could be a very simple, fun thing. It could be your insecurities or what you need to work out is thrown. It could be this amazing vision where you're out of body. It chooses what you need, which is what I like, because I don't want my ego to make these decisions, because my ego has desires, it pollutes things, and has an agenda. I would rather the spirits tell me, hey, Miguel, you need to work on this today, or this is what you need to see. Sometimes it's nightmarish, sometimes it's beautiful and ethereal, and sometimes it's just chill. Oh my God, I just got a revelation about my life, something I need to address. Simple.
Yeah. I think, I honestly have no idea. I know that there are a lot of people, depending on their circumstances, who think that the creator of this universe is perhaps evil. Me personally, I see as time goes along that the creator of this universe is clearly mischievous. I mean, but things get better for most people. But then you watch the Ken Burns Holocaust documentary and you say, for them, those people, there's no way they thought that the creator was a nice entity. There's no way they could think that. But, someone who's in, let's say, down the street in Burbank, and they're living a good life, and, they die in bed at 85, they think the creator is a good person, a good entity. So
Yeah.
I'm in the middle. I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, here we forget here in the United States, we really are the 1% of the world. We have not what we think is nature out there. That's not nature. That's Gaia. She's been in prison. She's been raped. She's been told chill. You know what I mean? Real nature, as I always say, nature is both my salvation and my destruction. It is not what we see out there, and it's hard to say because, of course, yeah, you make the argument of, yeah, things in life happen to make you stronger. There's a purpose. I believe in it. But then sometimes you go, well, what's the purpose in kiddie porn? I can't see what's the purpose in a baby dying after 2 months. At some point, like you said, there's something that's off, like Morpheus tells Neo, there's something wrong in the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there like a splinter in your mind driving you crazy. You go, do we really need a universe where animals and all sentient beings need to devour others to survive? But do we need a world of cancer and a world of destructive climate? I mean, we live in a world where Taylor Swift is famous. There's just something off with
She's
this.
got some good songs, though. Can we just talk about Lover as a good song? But I see your point.
Yeah, I'm sure there's people with better voices out there that never made. But anyway, it's a joke. It's a joke.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. And you're right. And for some reason, we have made things so superficial and so pretty that you have to look like Taylor Swift to make it. You have to be these people. And for some, you scratch the surface and there's something under there. And for some, you don't. It's just gold plated. And so we're here, and maybe the trick is being played on us, and we think we're in this really, really nice place, but really, I'm talking about the United States, in the middle class United States, we think we're in this really, really nice place, but really just we're being deceived even more.
Yeah, and it's not just the archons don't just keep us down through ignorance, through fear and other issues, but also through the good things. We get attached to material things. We start forgetting our nature. We start forgetting about caring about nature. So yeah, the good things can be as alluring as the bad things to keep us in a state of ignorance, not reach our potential, not wake up, not find out what our true destiny in this world. So I mean, but that's what they do. They're feeding on us, as the Gnostics would say. We are what holds the universe. We are their great treasure that they're just keeping. Again, like in the Matrix, where the Matrix needs our brain waves to survive.
I mean, I see the system as something like that. It does feed on creativity. All of these social media apps feed on people's creativity. My channel, your channel. I don't even know if you have to introduce anything supernatural about it. You just look at the way that Twitter works and the way that Instagram works, and we are feeding it with our pictures. It does nothing except take money and make more money and control us and trap us.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, it's those dopamine hits. It's as I tell people, are you consuming content? Are you engaging with this content? Are you just sitting there listening to podcasts and doom scrolling? Are you actually writing notes, finding new ways, studying things? And as Jung would say, when we don't address our darkness or our issues, we project out into the world, which in the classic one is, of course, the German people during the Weimar Republic. They didn't want to address their shadows, so of course they projected out onto the Jews, and this happens throughout history. And if you go on Twitter or Instagram, it's just people projecting their shadows and not integrating, not addressing, you're a fascist, you're a socialist, you're stupid. It's so destructive because we are meant to bring out the darkness. I mean, the Gospel of Thomas says, if you bring forth what is within you, it will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, it will destroy you. Yeah, you're supposed to bring what is within you, but you're supposed to address it, integrate it, play with it, make something out of both your light and your darkness, instead of just throwing it out there. As one Jungian told me, that's a problem you have with movie stars and musicians and rock stars, is they will bring out their shadow and create this beautiful music, but they don't integrate it, and that turns into self-destructive behavior, drinking and drugging and all that. Then the shadow comes in, then it comes out, and the shadow is the part of us that we are not addressing, the darkness within us, if you would, which we all have.
We all have, to a certain extent. And I think some people, when they really suppress it, it turns physical. You get ulcers, you get various diseases. And some people, I did a video on this. I said embrace the shadow, and I probably shouldn't have. I should have said acknowledge the shadow and use it and draw energy from it, because it may be neutral. I'm at the point where I don't know what's going on, and if this is neutral and this energy is just being used for nefarious purposes, because people tend to be a little bit mischievous. I think we're all like a little bit mischievous. This guy, I read this book. It's called A History of Knowledge. And this guy, Charles Van Doren, and he says boredom is the most dangerous thing for a civilization. It's not hate and it's not fear. It's just boredom. And he's talking about after World War, or before World War I, where Europe was just bored. So they were like, hey, let's go to war and destroy everything we've built just because it's time, I guess.
Yeah, it's not, it certainly is dangerous. And I would say about the shadow is the shadow is part of you. It's part of you that wants to be listened to. It's your trauma, it's your disillusionments, it's memories that have not been addressed, and it's coming for you. So whether you have to integrate it and you have to make it part of you because it has an important message. So I would say you are 100% right in saying embrace your shadow, or else it will consume you. And that's the problem. Again, we're talking about social media. Everybody's just puking their shadow. They're projecting. They're calling people all the stuff that they need to work on, or that they're afraid of, or that they're insecure about, and they make it worse. The more you project it, the more it's going to have the power to destroy you, and even create a collective shadow, which becomes, an egregore that takes on a sort of a massive thought form that takes away all individual thinking and creates the infamous mob that we've seen throughout history. So embrace the shadow.
Embrace it. These egregores, you call them, these mobs, these like madness circles have kind of consumed me for the past year and a half, because I've been watching them happen, many different ones, and it's divorced from logic, but it's still explained through logic. So I'm like, oh, that's even more dangerous than if we just didn't have the words to explain it. I don't want to get canceled or anything, but there are certain things that I'm like, especially with the medical community, where people embrace this sort of scientism, and they don't read the science and they don't understand the science, but they embrace it because there's these scientific words. And so that kind of gives the mob fuel, like a fire, so they can burn. And
Exactly.
it's nuts.
Oh yeah. It's like Mark Twain. Whenever you find yourself on the side of the majority, it's time to pause, because something's wrong. Again, this mob herd mentality. We are humans, right? We are, part of our evolutionary trait for safety is to conform and everybody march at the same place. So we can march to the water, we can march to the crops, we can all hold together if there's a danger. But unfortunately, in a civilization where metaphysics and intelligence and science, it kind of doesn't make sense anymore, or it should be questioned, if you would, because we are also now supposed to be a society of individual rights and all that. So, and for some reason, we humans have this tendency of turning on each other and going to war and trying to exterminate over when there's plenty of resources. So, I mean, a lot of it is probably civilization. I think you start thinking about civilization, one thing for civilization to survive when it was created, when we passed from hunter-gatherers, well, it's two things. One, we need an amazing amount of resources for roads, buildings, and all that. Two, we need slave labor, or civilization needed slave labor. A population itself cannot sustain. So the Sumerians and others would just learn to go outside and enslave other people. And that's unfortunately is part of civilization. Yeah, and you can say, well, slavery is over, but I hate to tell people, but slavery ain't over. As people in Taiwan or Bangladesh or other places, they shifted the hologram, if you would. So, and it's probably more nefarious than ever, because in ancient times, whether it was the plantation or the Roman, you had to house and feed your slaves. Now you can have your slaves working at a McDonald's and the government will pay for their housing and their food, right? Now we have the state playing instead of the plantation owner or the Roman lord or the Babylonian king. So things haven't changed. So we have to, I mean, one of the things I talk about in my podcast is we have to change the solar civilization Marduk mentality and bring back Tiamat, the witch, the lunar powers, the hunter-gatherer, to give balance to what society has become. It's still, I don't believe in this nonsense of bring down the patriarch, but I believe that the solar powers have gotten way too far. We've created a nuclear bomb. We're on the edge of destruction. Let's bring back Tiamat and these old goddesses, Sophia, so we can again be a more complete species, if you would. And yeah, I'm in the minority, but I'll keep fighting for it.
Well, something needs to give. I think on your point about slavery, the reason why the West was able to give up slavery is because machines kind of replaced it. And in the Caribbean, when they gave up their slaves, they actually found out that they saved money, like you said, because they didn't have to feed them or house them. So it is this shift. Maybe it's an evolution. I've been thinking about this, and that agriculture didn't really take off for like 10,000 years. The agricultural revolution was a failure up until Roman times. And so I'm like, well, maybe we're still in the growing process. I'm fairly optimistic about things. So, you know.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm optimistic. I'm just trying to, again, pull back the veil like the Gnostics, try to wake up people one person at a time, give them the options. Hopefully they'll wake up. Tell people that there is always another option or choice than what you think. It's not this binary that we've been taught. There are innovations, there are new ways of thinking, whether it's politics or medicine, and just sort of be as open-minded and know that there are solutions. I mean, we humans can create and adapt. That's one of our skills as a species, that we can adapt fast and we can adapt well, and we can again create. I mean, part of our divinity is that we can create, like God is the ultimate creator of the logos. And even William Blake, who was very influenced by Gnosticism, he believed imagination was our divine spark, our soul. That's what made us incredible, and we could literally change the universe. Even if the universe is a cold mechanistic place, a broken down machine, we can imbue it with holiness, with art, with empathy. We can do so much to change our reality, and that's what I keep trying to do, and obviously what you're doing too with your podcast.
I think so. I think maybe even if it is cold and mechanistic, we're not. I mean, some people are good and some people are bad. So that kind of washes together, off of what you're saying about how people don't really see their options. There's so many options out there, and people think that only what they've been showed is the option. It's very interesting because you watch all these people at dance class or any sort of dance, and they can do what the teacher does. It's just that the teacher had started the dance. But even by looking at the teacher never has to explain anything. It just does the dance. The teacher does the dance, and everybody does the dance. In the same way at weddings, one person knows the line dance. Now everybody knows the line dance. So I'm like, well, this is hopeful, because we do seem to be dancing to this rhythm, whatever it is. And I think dance is just easier to pinpoint than life in general. I know people get into frequencies as a whole new age thing, but that the whole universe is some sort of song. And we can either hear the rhythm and go along with it, or we fight it. And this is where our demise comes from. So I'm not sure if it's good or bad. I'm still in a point where maybe it could be good, maybe it could be bad. I've always said God is a comedian.
A trickster, huh? He's Loki. Yeah, yeah. It could be the trickster. The Aztecs, their supreme being of over here was a trickster god. They saw the ruler of the universe. He tricked what's his name? Kukulkan. I forgot what is his name in the Aztec, the feather serpent. He tricked his brother into humiliating himself and leaving the world of the gods, and he took over. So yeah, the universe has an irony and a dark sense of humor. I think we can both agree on that one.
Yeah, Gnostics seem to be the biggest heretics, the original heretic. I'm going to read you something I found today because I just like to read books because I don't go on Twitter. Like there's not an option to go on Twitter if I'm on a book. But if I read an article on my phone, then now I'm on Instagram and now I'm on Twitter.
Yeah.
It just happens. And it's unconscious. It's completely unconscious. I don't mean to click on the social media, but it's on my phone.
Mhm.
Anyway, this guy is called Paul Johnson, and he's talking about a history of Christianity. And he says of Gnosticism that thus it was, and indeed still is, a spiritual parasite which used other religions as a carrier.
Mhm.
Paul fought hard against Gnosticism, recognizing that it might cannibalize Christianity and destroy it, because Gnosticism was always changing. And this is, it's October is coming up, so it's this is the history of Christianity, and this is very by the book. It's legitimately a book. It's by the book. He's writing it from the institutional perspective of this is what happened. But what do you think about that? Calling Gnosticism parasitic?
Well, in a way, he's right. Again, as I mentioned, Gnosticism, the Gnostics, even if, again, they were the inheritors or the next generation of the Egyptian mysteries, they were so passionate about the idea of gnosis and astral travels and individuality that they believe you grab onto whatever rituals work for you. So there were Christian Gnostics who saw Jesus, and they saw Jesus and Sophia as tricksters because they were tricking the archons. But Gnostics eventually adapted to paganism, to Zoroastrianism. You have like the Mazdakites in Zoroastrianism. In Judaism, Kabbalah is often called Jewish Gnosticism. In Islam, Sufism and the assassins are Gnostics, as some have said, the Yazidis, Mandeans. So in a way, he's right, but it's not like they were trying to destroy. They were the part of the religion that said, look, if you have a need beyond following the rules and having faith, if you have a need of an interior experience, a thirst for the larger questions of life and what's beyond the universe, then we are the part that works for you. And obviously Catholicism later said, well, no, mysticism, we'll have our own mystics, but they're within our rubrics. The Gnostics were more wild and let's just fly out. So he's wrong and he's right. He's certainly wrong about Paul because a lot of what the Gnostics learned or took marching orders was from Paul. We're taught Paul in sort of the Sunday school with these some of the fake letters like Timothy and all that. But when you start reading Paul through a very unbiased lens and ignoring the rest of the New Testament, you start seeing an individual. He talks about the God of this world. He does say the word archons. He calls, I mean, in English, they're translated as princes and rulers, but he's saying archons. He talks about the wisdom of God, the Sophia of God, and in those times, you're not talking about a metaphor. You're literally talking about a hypostasis or an energy or a being with its own consciousness. So Paul has this very strange cosmology or Gnostic cosmology where we are the God of this world, controls this world, and this being Jesus comes down and he's sacrificed by the archons, but he wakes up people. The Gentiles and the Jews had never heard of the message of Jesus, and so he is very Gnostic, if some have said, and the Gnostics felt inspired. And plus, we have to remember that in the days of Paul and other Jews, the idea that these fallen angels or Nephilim or Watchers were controlling the universe or were managing the universe. I mean, even the Hebrew Bible talks about how every nation has an archon, a prince, an angel that rules it. So there was this idea that these angels were controlling, that God was too distant. You know, he's God, right? He's got better things to do than, manage this universe. But that these angels were probably starting to mismanage the universe, that they made mistakes, that gotten greedy, they were controlling and feeding off humans, mating with humans. Even in, I think it's Corinthians, Paul says to women, when you're in church and you're prophesizing, cover your head. And people are like, oh, he's being sexist. And then he says, because you will attract angels. Now, what does that mean? It's because if a woman is in an altered state, she could, a Nephilim or a Watcher might, oh my God, I hear this soul is shining. I'm going to go and rape her, or I'm going to go and corrupt her. So Paul was part of this culture that the Gnostics were part of too, where the universe was not what it seemed to be and it needed a lot of help.
Yeah. So that's interesting. He should have this take. I'm seeing a lot of Gnostic hate online now, and I started seeing
I
it
love it.
recently. Yeah. About a year or two ago, I don't want to name names, but a very famous, I guess, semi-right-wing figure, I wouldn't even call him right-wing, but semi-right-wing, started to say that transhumanism is linked with Gnosticism.
I know
And
who
so
you're talking.
yeah. And so that's why we're seeing all of these transhuman ideas get into people's heads, and it's a corruption of Christianity. I actually reached out to him. I was like, can you come on and explain what you mean by that? Because that is not my understanding of Gnosticism at all. And I guess if you can say anything's Gnosticism, then you can say that all heretical things are Gnosticism too. I mean, but what would you say to that? I mean, we're having technology that is assisting, supplementing human beings. That's transhumanism. But what does that have to do with Gnosticism?
Yeah, I think, as I've said, the Gnostics would be 100% against transhumanism, because they believe that we are here to become we are here to become fully human. That is our goal. We were created a certain way. To be fully human is to be fully divine. A human, we are the place where the fallen angel meets the rising ape, as it changes. We are, as the Hermetic says, the caretakers of the cosmos. We are to awake. We're not of this world, like the Sufi says, be in the world, but not of this world. We have a special place, and our special place does not be corrupted by mechanical dead things. So the Gnostics would be 100% against transhumanism and this idea that we're hackable animal, or all this stuff they would be 100% against easily. And but they get blamed a lot. There was the church father Irenaeus who said the Gnostics were worse than Satan. That's bad, because he said at least Satan admits that creation is a good place. He just doesn't he wants to corrupt it, but he admits, this is so. It was very controversial in ancient times, and even today, even with mainstream Christians, even with atheists and secularists, that the idea that this world was not good or was a construct, it was very controversial. As a scholar, April DeConnick said, the Gnostics didn't become heretical. They were heretical from the get-go. In ancient times, whether you were Roman or Jew and all that, you had the universe was set up, and the gods, the world was reflected in our temples and our towns, and everything was just this flow, and as long as you sacrificed to the gods, everything was fine. And the Gnostics said, no, your gods are crazy. They're deficient beings. They're this whole place, there's something wrong. And that really pissed off both the Christian, secular, pagan authorities, and caused them to persecute the Gnostics throughout history, because it was such a radical thing to say. And it's even radical today with groups. And of course, the persecution has gone throughout history with the Sufis and and the Cathars and other groups. I have no problem saying that you can weaponize Gnosticism, but as long as we're in this world everything can be weaponized. You know very well that Christianity has been weaponized to the death of billions of people throughout history. You know that capitalism, socialism, all systems, Islam can be weaponized to create something negative. And I would say that weaponized Gnosticism might be the most powerful thing in the world. I mean, there are scholars who say, for example, well, Scientology is easily a Gnostic movement, Heaven's Gate. There's a few other, and you could make a case that Nazism and communism are weaponized Gnosticism, because you create these individuals that are unique and special. Then you create these archons, and they say that your world is false and we can do a better world. The thing that they make a mistake, there is no utopia in any Gnostic scripture. There is no better place. The better place is your interior world. That's where the battle is found. You waking up is utopia, but you're never going to find anything about a utopia. And that's what they keep putting in the Gnostic mouths, which is not true at all. And weaponized Gnosticism is ultimately false, because again, there's no utopia, there's no heaven on earth. The battle is won with your interior world, you waking up and you helping the least of your brothers and people around you wake up and heal them and try to help them out.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how this idea caught on, but it caught on as soon as a few more people repeat these things, and someone says it, someone repeats it.
Yeah, I
And
mean, they've been projecting on the Jews and the Gnostics and whatever your boogeyman is for centuries. It's not, nothing has changed. It's like the hologram is the same. You think about it. It's the same baddies, same goodies, same kind of.
yeah. Now, you just touched on it a little bit, but waking up within this prison, this place, and we talk about the Black Iron Prison on this channel, but I talk about it as a space that's created with words and ideas, because I don't necessarily say that anyone has to believe in anything. I have a lot of Christian viewers, but I have a lot of Muslim and Jewish viewers as well, and I'm sure Buddhist. So I keep it that can be explained through science. So I did this video called The Black Iron Prison, and I said, is it a prison? Is it a palace? I mean, it's what you decide it is, but first you have to realize that there is a space. If you don't know that there is a space, then you are definitely in a prison.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
you say it's not a palace.
Well, I mean, you can be trapped in a palace. I mean, the bars can be golden. I think, again, I think the point is that this is, as humans, we have the capacity to reach into some dimensions which are just breathtaking. I'm sure we were talking about the DMT, and I'm sure your viewers in their lives, as I have, you had call it an oceanic feeling or a mystic feeling. It could be while you were doing drugs, or you were watching a sunset, or maybe it was sex, maybe you were watching a child smile. It was just a dream, and you had this amazing feeling of unity, just perfect. And it didn't last, but most people sort of dismiss it. But the reality, that is our natural state of being. Why are we being robbed of it when we could be in a sense of bliss or unity or pure love forever, all the time, instead of what we are now? I know the argument, and it's a valid argument, because Aldous Huxley made it. He was high one day on peyote, and he was just having the time of his life. And he looked over and he said, shit, I gotta wash my dishes. And it's true, you can't be high you can't be in a state of bliss, because who's going to take out the trash or go to work? So that's a good argument, but I feel we have the capacity to feel this ecstasy that the Gnostics were looking for, to commune with this alien God. And I feel we're not there. I think there's a saying, I forget it's an Egyptian author who I can't pronounce his name, and shame on me for not knowing Arabic, but he said, how do you know when you're home, when all your attempts to escape cease? And we're all trying to escape. When we, like you said, when you look at your social media, when we want to overeat, when we want to get a higher salary, we're all kind of escaping, trying to escape. We're not comfortable. I mean, in Buddhism, the suffering means dukkha, which means a loose wheel. And I'm sure you've gone grocery shopping. That loose wheel will drive you crazy. And that's what suffering is in Buddhism, again, with Morpheus. we're not 100% comfortable. We're not in that state of perfect bliss that the Buddha was, that Jesus was when he transfigured. So I would say whether it's a prison or a palace, it doesn't matter. The question is, are we really home? I think if we're honest with each other, I would say no.
See, that's interesting to me because it seems that people's brains are assholes. There's that meme, that asshole brain meme.
Yeah.
Because if you can leave your brain alone and stop thinking about everything all the time and actually be in the now, you can do some amazing things. But the second you start thinking about it, like a dance, you start thinking about the choreography of the dance, it's over. Once you learn the choreography, you have to then dance and not think about anything else either. You're just, for some, your body's just doing it. You have to be in the moment. And that's like the whirling dervishes. They spin around. And I think I'm an American whirling dervish because I go and I spin around on skates, and it's my favorite thing to do. Like,
That's your ecstasy, your bliss. Yeah.
it is ecstasy because you have to be completely still, and you're going so fast. And it goes with chakras and all this stuff about, being balanced over the body. But in order to appreciate what your body can do, you kind of have to tell your brain to be quiet. And especially if you're like me and you're always thinking about this and thinking about this, and this concept relates to this. If you do that and you're in the middle of a choreographed dance, you screw up. You forget. But if you're able to think about nothing, somehow your body will on its own remember the dance and know exactly what you have to do. So it's like you have to trust yourself and you have to trust the moment. But we find it so hard to do that because it takes a lot of training, and it takes a lot of falling, and it takes a lot of pain and embarrassment before you. And maybe that's why the God is not so mean, because he's like, I'm going to make you suffer, but in that suffering, you will forget about your brain and you'll have to shut your ego off. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's you have to shut your ego off. And I don't know about other sports. I know other people do other sports like skateboarding. I'm sure to get that pop at the right point, you have to, just, you can't be anywhere but in that second. And it's a fleeting second. The now is always gone. There is no now, that kind of thing. But it's very experiential. Like you actually have to put the work in to get to that point. Maybe Jordan knows it. Jordan probably knows on some of those dunks what he was doing. That's just like, time has stopped.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, ecstasy simply means going outside of your mind. And I think you're 100% right on what you said, but I think you have to trick your mind. Your ego is in charge of reality. It wants control over reality, food, sex. What am I going to watch tonight? That's his job. But it's also, our mind is also a trickster too, as some have said. Hermes in ancient times was the god of the mind, but he was also the god of tricks. So it's always playing tricks on us, as some have said. A part of the first directive of the mind is to make sure that we don't see reality, to trick us. What we see outside, it's not reality. Physics are showing it. Philosophers are, the simulation theory, which is very popular, supported by Elon Musk, tells us it's not reality, but it tells us it's reality because we need to survive as a species. Again, we need to go out and hunt. We need to find shelter, all that. So in a way, we have to find ways to trick our mind for a second, to allow our soul to come out, our higher self to come out, and so forth. And that's where, again, entheogens might work. For you, skating works. For others, it's meditation. For others, it could be anything, music, who knows? But again, that's where it gets complicated because each of us is a completely unique being. So we need a completely unique prescription. That's why I don't believe in these religions have these like BuzzFeed listicle things. If you do this and this, if you follow this guru, you're going to get this altered state of mind. And I always say, no, you got to mix and match it. You got to find, as Joseph Campbell, you got to follow your own bliss and find out what works for you. And that's what the Gnostics said. That's why they were called parasites, because they believed like everything in the kitchen, saying, I'm going to borrow this from this religion. I'm going to attach myself to this religion for a while. I'm going to use this. And if I don't like it, I'll just go somewhere else. And I think that's the important one. So I would tell your viewers, don't just don't look for a list. You got to find it. I know it's hard, but being an individual is very hard.
Yeah. I guess I would say that whatever you're drawn to, trust it. So if
Bingo.
you're drawn to art, then do that. Whatever speaks to you. It's different for everybody. And just because your best friend is drawn to assembling tiles, which can be very spiritual, doesn't mean
Very.
that you're gonna assemble tiles in a way that's gonna help you like that.
Yeah, or your culture might be completely against you doing something. If your culture doesn't allow you to use drugs, or your culture doesn't allow you to do belly dancing or whatever it is, or you have demands. I got to get a job, so therefore I can't do walking meditation or Reiki. You're gonna have to fight that, because the universe will conspire against you.
Yeah. Now we know we need money, but it shouldn't take over our lives, especially since money now exists entirely on the phone. I'm like, well, what is it? I mean, before it was paper, which on its own was like, okay, now I have a lot of paper around. This is paper. Why is this not $1 million? But now it's just phone. It's just an idea. So
This information, yeah, yeah. When
can't
you
take it
think
so
about
seriously.
things, it makes sense. I mean, I was in Portugal, and of course my family's always fighting about the damn pandemic, because we got to take sides and everybody's got to argue. That's what families do, especially Mediterranean families. And I remember telling, okay, now that everybody has a little distance, are you aware that this allegedly started by one guy in the middle of a market, had a bat for lunch? The more you think about it now, the less sense it makes. It's like, and it changed 7 billion people. When you stop and think, like you said, money and social media, when you think about it, you realize it's all very illogical. It's almost like some sort of enchantment that we've been all put into, that doesn't allow us to look beyond the veil to what is happening. I mean, money is one of the big magical things. And most of what we see today, politics, everything, is just the powers that be using sorcery against us.
Sorcery. Yeah. It's interesting. Back in the day, everything was philosophy. Math was philosophy, engineering was philosophy was philosophy, magic was philosophy. And now we've split it up and we say, well, philosophy is separate. That's a mind thing. Magic is, not real. But really, it's mentalism,
Mm.
which I suppose came out in earnest about 120 years ago, but it's been going back until Egyptian times. It's the mind can create these structures, maybe out of boredom, maybe out of necessity. I don't know. Maybe boredom, it just shows that there is a need for it. So I don't even want to rag on boredom, even though I wish people could be a little bit more bored, just be happy to be a little bit more bored. But
Yeah, it's the old hermetic idea: as above, so below, as within, so outside, macro and the micro. If we are in the universe is within us. Our mind is the greatest source of magic and power. And magic, as Dion Fortune said, is the ability to change consciousness in accordance with the will. And if our consciousness change, we can change reality. As we were talking, we could have 100 million people believing in something that's completely false, or believing that the sky is pink or whatever. I mean, in ancient times, they didn't even have the color blue. That's something that was sort of invented later on. When you read Homer, civilizations in India, they call the sky red and pink, all these colors, because there was no blue. We hadn't sort of agreed to have our next hallucination, which was the color blue. So that's the real power, is controlling the mind. We can change reality, because most of the universe is really just information. That's all it is.
yeah, we have our physical reality. They're the laws of physics. But when you look at all the things that don't fall into the laws of physics, and then like you were saying about the pandemic, yeah, I don't know if that was magic or if that was just a lie. If they just lied to people and then people got so into it. And then that creates another internal structure of defensiveness. And now they have
Right.
to defend and this has to happen. And it's like, well, if you go back to the original, what the laws of physics are and what the laws of nature are, is what you're saying. Does that make any sense? But we can't, because these structures are almost as strong as physical structures. especially when there are people with physical bodies that are enforcing them, then they become de facto physical structures.
Yeah, as Mark Twain said, it's easier to fool somebody than to convince somebody that they've been fooled. And I'm the number one person. I believed in some dumb shit things throughout my life, and I'm still like, what was I thinking? We all do that. We think this guy or this hot girl is just the most, we're projecting, right? We're projecting all our good things up, and then we go, what was I thinking? Or some music we used to like, or some religion. I mean, it's, again, the mind is the trickster, and it could fool us into some strange places. And when you get a whole population agreeing to something, that's when, yeah, it's incredible. And I should tell your listeners too, as I like to say, there's a saying that goes, millionaires don't believe in astrology, billionaires believe in astrology. The elite are using magic against us. They've been doing it since the times of the Babylonians and the Egyptians. Whether you think it works or not, they believe in these rituals. They believe in these entities. They believe in this sort of mass magic, human sacrifice, and that's not going to stop. And so the best we can do is learn about magic, about psychology, philosophy, all these things, so that we can understand the magic they're using against us. Even if at the end of the day you're secular and you think it's all propaganda, it's all advertising. Well, propaganda and advertising are some of the most powerful forms of magic there is.
Oh yeah, that's what I learned about in school. I was supposed to be one of these people. That's what I would have been trained for, is to market to people. And I was like, nah, I'm good on that. But have you read this book called The Elite Charade of Changing the World?
No, but I like the title already.
It's fantastic. And Anand, I forget his last name. I'm going to mispronounce his last name, so I'll just put it on the screen. He basically says that these elites will go out and they'll say, this is how the future is, and the future is going to be this way. And he's saying they're only doing that because they're creating the future by telling everybody that that's how the future is going to be. So that is magic. They're putting everybody under this spell, and then it comes true because they have said it. They have spoken it into existence.
Oh yeah, I love it. Yeah, I got to check out this book, but I think they're failing. I mean, there's the old Zoroastrian saying that evil always turns stupid. Their bag of tricks starts to not work, and we hope that the internet has democratized and awoken enough people, because even look, I mean, Mark Zuckerberg and that Meta stuff, I think he could have pulled it off 10 years ago, but I think people are too red pill to buy into it. And they're not buying into all the other nonsense that's been being thrown down at us. And as I say, you only need 5 to 10% of the population to wake up to really make a difference. But I think in some ways it's better. We are a bit more awake to whatever future they're trying to throw at us, and they've lost their imagination. They've got the same bag of tricks that they always do, and it's just the emperor has no clothes, and we are paying attention to the man behind the curtain.
Oh yeah, they've pulled. Did you see Dopesick? Did you see the series Dopesick?
Dopesick? No, never heard of it.
Oh, it was a mini series, stars Michael Keaton, and it's about the OxyContin with
Yeah.
the Sackler family, and how these were drug dealers that got everybody addicted. They spun this tale. They created a new thing, chronic pain. They created this new idea and it got into people's heads, and people started experiencing chronic pain. And to an extent, it was sort of a hysteria. And they made this world, and they made themselves billions of dollars. But if you look at that documentary and you see how they did it, or they just wash, rinse, and repeat. This was in 2000. So at least twice since then. And, in the past 5 years, twice in the past 5 years, they've pulled this again.
Yeah, it's the whole hysteria thing is, as the book Dune and the movie says, fear is the mind killer. And somebody, marketing, you're always supposed to tap into their fears. I mean, the Ring of Powers that I'm watching, it's dreadful, but there is one scene with the guy who's obviously has to be Sauron, where he's telling Galadriel, how do you exploit people? He says, show them their fear and give them the means to master it. Like you said, show people that they have, that they're aching, that they're depressed, give them the drugs to master it. And in them thinking they've mastered their fears, you're actually now ruling them because they've become dependent on you. And we see this thing over and over. Even recently, I've always had an obsession with Elvis Presley. And it cracks me up because individuals like Elvis and Philip K. Dick, they were in the 70s and 60s, they were 100% against drugs. Philip K. Dick was writing Nixon. Elvis showed up at the White House and was telling Nixon, we got to start this war on drugs and alcoholism. But both were dope heads because they were getting prescriptions for their doctor, because in their minds, their programming, and these are two very bright, artistic, rebellious individuals, doing drugs on the streets bad, prescription from doctor good. And they both became addicted to drugs, and Elvis obviously died because of it. But you see the programming, how subtle and nefarious it can be. I mean, and it could happen to us. I freely admit I have to always be watching myself because I could be killing myself right now and not even know it. So they've introduced some substance or something, some blind spot, and they found the magic to put me in an illusion.
Yeah. What's really interesting, I don't know, I'm echoing, but Wetiko. I was introduced to that concept on your show, the concept of Wetiko. Can you explain it to my viewers? I'm sure you'll do a better job than me.
Yeah, Wetiko is part of there's a movement that you have with John Lamb Lash, David Icke, where the archons, it's sort of a modernizing of the archons, or an innovation or a discovery. I mean, it could be both, where instead of the archons being these astral lords, these angels that are controlling the simulation, they're actually mind parasites that control our mind. You might say the little devil within us, although this little devil can tell us to do good, and it both feeds off of us and makes sure that we live a life of delusion, illusion. In fact, the Gnostics did have that. Certain groups called it the counterfeit spirit, that as soon as our divine spark was cast, the archons would create a fake version of ourselves that would rule our fate, that had all our dooms and bad decisions and all that. So this is what the mind parasite is. And Paul Levy calls it the Wetiko because it's kind of talks about the Native American idea of this cannibalistic spirit, the Wendigo, the Wetiko, who not just will turn you into a monster too. So there's this movement in modern times to relate the archons to Wetiko as mind parasites. Other people like to talk that the archons are extraterrestrials, that they engineered humanity and they're up there in the sky controlling us. And there are individuals, again, like John Lamb Lash or David Icke, who say, no, the archons can be both. They can be both extraterrestrials and these mind parasites that are latched to our brain, that are making sure that we never wake up, that we're docile slaves, that we're attracted to material delights, that we're selfish and mean. So that in a nutshell is Wetiko too. But as Paul Levy says, to recognize your counterfeit spirit, that's where your salvation is. Like we talked about the shadow, if you can bring out your shadow and recognize it and see the darkness in it and even embrace it and hug it and make it part of you and accept it, that is your salvation. That's how you become more of a whole human being. That's how you break out of the lack of free will that is controlling or that is part of this simulation.
I think Christians may understand it as the great deceiver. Satan, his role as the great deceiver. He's always going to lie. Did you see that movie, The Devil's Advocate?
Oh yeah, very Gnostic. Yeah.
I love that movie. But when he comes
at
the end,
it is true. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, at the end where where Keanu Reeves actually breaks free of Satan, who is his father, and then he is put back in time, and then he just takes the form of the reporter and says, well, do this because you're a good person, but it's the same thing. Yeah,
in this simulation, I'm going to find a way to get you. I'm the great trickster. one way or another, we're gonna play this game. I mean, even Philip K. Dick always talked about the programmer and the counterfeit. We're playing this game throughout infinity. And there's nothing, that's what's interesting about mainstream Christians is like they're starting to get it after centuries, because you see it more how Christians are embracing UFO and the idea of a simulation, but it's all in the Bible. I mean, if you look at the Gospel of Mark, when Satan takes Jesus to the mountain to tempt him, he says, all the kingdoms of the world I own, I rule. And again, Paul talks about the God of this world, the powers and principalities. I mean, it was not alien in ancient times or for Christianity or Judaism to think that this universe was controlled by this being like Satan in the devil's advocate, who's sort of playing a nefarious game with us. But again, in this game is our salvation. If we can break through and overcome these tests, we get a little bit wiser each time. We have a little bit more Sophia.
And so I have to wonder, within the Gnostic tradition and this idea of a simulation, we must choose to come back then. We must choose to play again if there's a reincarnation. There must be something we get out of it.
That's one way of seeing it. I mean, the Gnostics, of course, never agreed on any. As anarchists, they're not going to agree. Their visions are similar of how the universe is, but some would say, no, we are trapped like Neo. There was a cosmic war or cataclysm, and God got broken up. As some scholars said, the story of Gnosticism is God went crazy and became us, and we fell to the universe, and Sophia's trying to wake us up. Others said, no, 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 this is all us. We looked down at the universe and we said we wanted to explore different alternative versions of ourselves. Others said, you know, God, the alien God, in knowing itself, had to know what iniquity, what loss, what depression, what mortality was. So it's God experiencing it. So it could be us. I mean, as we're talking, I was reading a book about the simulation, and it, you know, the universe is information and it's all code, whether our DNA and the fabric of matter, all that. But if it's code, there has to be a coder, there has to be a medium, and there has to be somebody who receives the information. What happens is there has to be an agreement. If the demiurge is creating this simulation, I have to understand what the language is. Like, you know, if you watch TV and there's just light coming out, you know the language of the TV, of the information, right? You know it's The Little Mermaid or a Marvel movie or something, you know it. So in a way, it's like we kind of have agreed because we agreed to the language that's coming. We agreed to the rules of the coder. So that's one way to see it.
Yeah, I mean, if free will goes all the way to the top, then we would have had free will to get here. But of course, I mean, all of this could have been, there's no reason why any of this has to have, you know, a god or a demiurge or anything, because the more you learn about chaos theory, and you can just set things in motion and who knows what happens.
But we
However,
have forgotten, that's the Gnostic slant. We have forgotten our origins. We have forgotten, perhaps we are the game player, and we've forgotten that we think we're the avatar. So somewhere we forgot, I think, and we're trying to remember, which is the goal of mysticism, altered states of consciousness, you rollerblading or being on the skates. You know, we know there's something missing and we need to remember it.
yeah. Yeah, I like the skates for you have to be in the moment. You're not allowed to be out of the moment. And the same thing with any sort of thing that involves music is you're forced you're forced into a frequency. You're kind of forced to float, and it is your body, but it's separate from your body. And I think it's beautiful. And I think it's how we were designed. Somehow it just makes real sense, because just that line dancing at weddings, one person line dances and then we all line dance. And then I think that's what it is. But I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, or maybe we don't. Maybe, as someone said, maybe there are NPCs, maybe some of us are awake. I mean, in ancient times, again, humans were basically herd animals. They did their stuff to survive, but there were always those, the artistic, the ones who were schizophrenic or who heard voices. those were the special people, and those were chosen to be the shamans, to be the artists, to draw on the caves, to go on these spiritual voyages, to mix plants and talk to nature to find out what plants were. And I think today we need to get back to it, because today, I mean, I'm sure you agree, if you digress, we're going to dope you up, we're going to call you a loser, an outsider, all that. It's much harder when in ancient times, if you had those needs, society was just better equipped. I mean, even if you want to become a rock star or a movie star, somehow you get into this world of drugs and sex that ultimately does more damage than good.
Yeah, and also back in the day, they needed people. Now I feel what they say, useless eaters, that, and I don't believe this. I do not believe this. I don't believe in NPCs either, but there is sort of this collective understanding that, okay, we have to compete with the machines. Coming up on this generation might be a few more generations where humans really have the last hurrah, and then it's the machines. So it's in my opinion that because we have creativity, we can compete with the machines for a while longer. But I think there is this fear that the machines are breathing down our necks. And if we don't get with the program and, do everything, then, oh, you're useless. You go to the side. You're a wasted life. Whereas maybe before, they needed that person. It was a set of hands. A set of hands mattered. And now even a horse, like even a car is, 120 horses. So we don't matter. The organic matters so much less now than it once did, except to eat. And I think that's about it, honestly.
It's not just creativity, but also I think empathy. I think that's what separates us, is that we do, for our survival, we do care for others emotionally, physically. I mean, we do like to put our elders on a good, or we used to, in a pedestal so that we could learn their wisdom and understand their stories. So I think empathy really separates us from the machines and from a lot of the animals. Not all animals. Elephants show an immense amount of empathy, dolphins, and so forth. But we humans, we do believe, and that's what Philip K. Dick, he said. Philip K. Dick always said, AI will never become conscious because it will never understand what empathy is, to feel for others, to be connected deeply with other life forms. So I agree with him. He always saw that the machines would never be able to really succeed, because without empathy or creativity, how can you innovate? How can you grow? How can you really set your foot on this planet and deal with the giant machine that is the universe?
Yeah. Have you gone into the AI readers where you type in, like, someone typed in Danny DeVito as Jaws and it gives you 9 pictures, and it's just
Yeah.
absolute absurdity. And it's good to laugh at. But at least with music, it's coming into the arts where the AI is able to create art that a person looking at it will say that's better than what a human did. It doesn't mean humans should stop by any means, but
No.
a person looking at it will say, well, that's better art. And then you have to decide, well, what is art? And what does it mean to make art? Does it mean that you're pulling an idea from the divine and making it material? And then if so, if a machine can make an idea material but not understand the idea, well, still it has replaced the artist. I deal with this all the time because I do a lot of realism painting. And then you think, well, the photograph has replaced that entire line of work. There's no reason for me to be a portrait painter. Like, it's not a job. We have photographs now. And then the person who used to
Yeah.
be the best singer on the block, and everyone would come around to their house to be like, oh, Mary, she has the most beautiful voice. You have to hear her voice. Well, she's nothing compared to a record of Aretha Franklin. So, and then so forth and so on. It's just the technology is slowly eating away at what makes us human.
Exactly, or just making copies of copies of copies. It's not creating any sort of new innovation or anything like that. I mean, again, I was thinking of Elvis Presley. I mean, this guy basically, without him, there wouldn't be rock and roll. But what was Elvis? He really was a shaman, because what he did is he took not just the blues, which was obviously, even in the Black community, the blues was considered satanic, but it was sort of African lore and a lot of Satan as a trickster. It was magical. But he also would go to Black churches and do, speak in tongues and do the shakes and all that. He took this metaphysics and he combined it with his own Christian understanding, and he created something that was completely unique that we're never going to find anywhere in history. And I'm sure you could go Michael Jackson and, people who really innovated the world, and no machine could come up with them because these individuals were really spiritual. I mean, beyond that, if you read the works of Jeff Kripal, these people who changed science in the early 20th century, from Einstein to, Neil Bohr to so many, they were influenced by Eastern mysticism, by Neoplatonism, it was metaphysics and religion that opened their mind to see reality and to see the corners behind reality. Heisenberg, so many of these thinkers. So I really think you really need a spiritual dimension, or like you said, this music and art will get stale and it will make humanity stale. So I do think you need that metaphysics to really create art and innovation and invention. And I don't see machines having them. I don't think a machine could ever get to the level of Elvis Presley or Michael Jackson. No way.
Yeah, I hope not, but I am not so sure of that, especially if you stop teaching people how to discern and understand art. Then
Mhm.
if you're speaking in a language that nobody understands, you could be saying the most brilliant thing, but they don't know what you're saying. So at some point, I mean, it's going to come to a head. So maybe we teach art more and we teach what it means and that it has meaning and that humans do have meaning and we're not just, disposable and interchangeable. This whole dating scene has me kind of messed up and I have to do a video on it because it makes people seem like they're interchangeable. Like you can
Mhm.
list off qualities and then you can be like, "Oh, give me a copy of that." And it's like you can't get a copy of that. That's a human who happens to come in that form. You can't just be like,
Right.
"Oh, that's what I want and that's what I want to marry." They're 6 feet tall. They make $100,000 a year. They just check off boxes. But that's not what a human is. A human doesn't just check off boxes. AIs check off boxes. Humans do not. And so I think we get very confused right now. And if people don't understand that a human doesn't check off boxes, that a human is something else entirely, then maybe they will just start checking off boxes. Like how teenagers are supposedly dated maybe 10 years ago. It was the captain of the football team goes to the head cheerleader and then down and down and down. It just it wasn't like these people found a connection. They just said, well, I will fall into this. And so you see, we're not machines, but we did make the machines. And I think we made them in our
Mhm.
image. I think we are becoming more like the machines as they're becoming more like us.
Mhm.
It's scary.
Yeah, yeah, to an extent. What did I watch that? There's two shows. I watched the first season of Euphoria, and then there's another great show called I Think I Might Destroy You Later. And it talks about, it's very different. Like you said, it's not the cheerleader, and it's very, there's gradients and dark spaces and drugs and machinery. I don't know. I think in a way it's almost like that's our reaction, to stay one step away from the machine, because young people are so connected to their machines, but they're also so unpredictable and chaotic.
Which is good. That's
Yeah, it is
so
good. It's
far.
good. Again, I'm talking about Tiamat, lunar forces that to counteract the algorithm, the
Yeah.
chaos, if you would. Yeah.
I love chaos. Chaos is my favorite topic. And I'm so happy
Chaos.
about chaos.
We need more chaos. Yes, yes. I know it's scary, but we need to be scared. As they say, everything you ever wanted is on the other side of fear. And advice that I need to take more often. Yeah, if you want to really wake up, do something every day that scares you. And it can be, take a different route to work, or do some hobby that worries you, or, go down on the trails and lose yourself for 5 minutes, just something that scares you. And you'll feel more alive.
Hmm, I might do that. Well, I will let you go because it has been over an hour. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on, for answering my questions. And can you tell the Moondog Vance that Maya Muses says hi?
I will tell him for sure. Yeah, he'll be delighted too. So that he's been recognized. Always misses company. He's a blast.
Please come back.
Anytime. This has been fun. I enjoyed it. The simulation seemed more real for an hour.
Thank you. Well, Miguel Conner, Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio, you have a fantastic rest of the day.
You too. Take care. Thanks for having me on.